Welcome everyone to our fundamentals of virtual facilitation. And today myself, that's Aarti, and Andy, my colleague from the UK, are going to be hosting this session for all of you. And we are from Leadership Tribe. So our game plan for today, what is it that we are covering? What are we going to be covering is that we're going to be doing a bit of the greetings and introductions, which we've just done. And we're going to look into what is facilitation and look at the different tools that are there. And we'll be sharing some of the tools that we use during our facilitation sessions. And we will also look at what are things that you consider when facilitating any session that you do. It could be a meeting, it could be a training or any kind of engagement with individuals. And we will also look at what are the different further development paths that we have for you that you can explore. And we will look at the Q&A finally towards the end of the session. All right. So I've got a question for all of you. What is facilitation according to you? So in the chat box, you can select the option of everyone and put in your thoughts of what is facilitation according to you. And I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Orchestration, engagement.
Orchestration.
Beautiful.
I love that. Orchestration. Like when you're conducting an orchestra. I love that answer. Engagement as well.
Yeah. Any other thoughts that you would like to add? Okay, Anurag also says orchestration, getting participation. Yes, that is one element to it. Enabling teams to come to conclusions and creating an open environment. I'm loving these answers that are being shared over here. All right, so what we have here is, when we look at it, what is facilitation is about what? So in this, what you can see on my screen, we put in a few lines about it. Now, there are two of them that do not really fit in. Which would it be? Would it be A, B, C, D, or E? So there are a couple of options. So in the chat box, you can add that and say, select the alphabet that you think does not fit in about facilitation. B and C. Okay, Meenakshi, right? Any others? Okay, Jason also says B, C. Okay. Beautiful. I think you all have nailed it, right? Oh, someone has said E. That is interesting. Okay, so when we look at facilitation, it is about providing leadership to others through a process and using different tools to encourage participation. Like all of you said, it's an orchestration. It's about helping that group move forward to the goal that they need to achieve, right? Collaboratively, what I think Russell mentioned, helping others get to a common outcome collaboratively. So that fits in there with the aspect of leadership, and you're enabling the group to deliver that desired outcome, right? Now, there are a lot of different definitions of facilitation that you might come across, and some of it, what you've shared is your perspective of it, which is absolutely spot on. So here we've got one that we like to share with you. That is, it is a fluid process that uses a variety of tools, techniques, and activities to empower the participants, create a clarity, and invite collaboration, right? And along with that, it also increases the commitment to the solution that is created by the group in order to maximize their productivity. All right. Now, when we look at facilitation, and we've come across and observed that sometimes we tend to confuse facilitation with training, and we look at it as almost the same thing. However, there is a slight difference to it. But what I want to do is, over here, have a look at these subpoints, that which of these apply to facilitation and which of these apply to training, right? So you've got one side that says it is learning, hierarchical, applying, it's linear and a long term. And versus where you have thinking, collaborative, communicating, flexible, and immediate. So when we look at facilitation, and with these points here, you've got training. So when we look at training, it is where you're managing that process and that context. So like normally what you do is you bring you have a context expertise or have a specific set of content that needs to be covered to ensure that your participants leave that session with a series of learning objectives, right? So that falls under training and what a trainer does. However, when we look at facilitation, it's an entire process. It's a fluid process of thinking, collaboration, that communication where there's engagement, there's flexibility, and it's immediate, right? So here, your participants provide the content to an extent, and the facilitator plays a role to aid that group in managing that knowledge and the conversation to those results that you're looking at. Yeah. Now, when we look at facilitation, and we've looked at a slight difference of facilitation and training. Now, as a facilitator, one needs to have a mindset, which is very important. So we're going to look at what exactly is the facilitator's mindset here. And I think the first bit might sound familiar to you. Have you heard of teaching how to fish versus giving the fish every time, right? There's a story also that I've heard, or a proverb, where you give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, and you teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So here, as facilitators also, you're playing a role where you are allowing that collaborative conversation. You're allowing participants to find their answers. You're allowing them to discover, right? Rather than just giving them the solution every time. There will be situations where you might need to give them the solution, but before you get to that, see how much you can allow them to discover and explore. Secondly, it's about staying curious and seeing the best in people, right? Over judging or manipulating. Now, is judging really bad? Not always, right? It depends on the context of it. Now, as a human being, you need to use your judgment, right? When you're making any decision, example, when you're hiring somebody, or, when you need to make any decision, there is a bit of judgment that comes into play. However, as the facilitator, it is advisable to be curious about the people that you're working with. Explore and see what's the best in them, rather than just being very judgmental about it. Otherwise, it hampers in your facilitation. And thirdly, you focus on leverage in that present moment over speculating on past or future events, right? Now, you need to be present and in the moment, right? Carrying a negative emotion about somebody from any previous engagement or a current situation can hamper, right? Does this help anybody at all? If you're going to be in a space where you are, holding something from the past and bringing it into a session. Example, I remember there was, I was supposed to go on a vacation once, and just before I'd gone for a vacation, there was some incident that played around in my head. But when I did then go over my, went out for my vacation, I was still carrying that grudge with me, which wasn't worth it, because it was just, not playing well with my trip. Similarly, with your facilitation, your engagement with your participants can be impacted if you have any of these kind of emotions that you pull in. And lastly, it's about responding to change over following a plan. And I'm sure we've all heard the statement, and it's very familiar, right? Planning is important. However, following that plan is not, right? Now, there's always constant change, right? And you need to be able to adapt. You need to have that phase where you can adapt and dance to the environment that you're in. Because as a facilitator, we spoke of a collaborative conversation. Now, yes, there's a set agenda that you might have, which leads to various conversations. Now, as a facilitator, you are guiding that conversation, right? And it allows you a space. It's not a rigid process, right? It's flexible. So it allows you that space that, okay, you can shift things around, you can shift conversations around and play around with it. So having this kind of a mindset is definitely advisable and something one can work on. Okay, somebody is not able to see the slides. Is that the case? Andy, are my slides visible?
I can see them fine.
All right. Thank you, Chandran.
Chandran says visible.
All right. Thank you. Yes, I do have a mini sore throat. The weather is just wonderful in Delhi right now. All right. So the next bit that is also important is listening. Now, before I get to that, I have a question. Have you heard of this word? I've put it in the chat box. LOL, lol. What does it stand for? Yeah, Hem says yes. Levels of listening. I think I recognize him, and I think I've met him earlier. Thank you. All right. Expressing comedy, the lol version. Okay. So in this context, I'm going to say that him is right here. Laugh out. Okay, yeah. So it is levels of listening. So now, as a facilitator, it is very, very important that you listen and when you are facilitating. Now, when we look at listening, there are three different levels that we're looking at. One is the internal listening. Now, this is the lowest level when it comes to listening, and most of us tend to be in that. However, it's not an intentional thing. It does just automatically happen. Have you been in meetings where you've sat in a meeting and suddenly, your mind tends to go, there's that little voice in your head and you're suddenly thinking, okay, what's my plan for the after the session? Or, oh, I needed to do this, or, oh, I needed to send that email out. We've all had those moments. Or when you're having a conversation with somebody also, there's that little chatter that happens of what do you want to ask that person next, or what do you want to say, or your assumption of that scenario, right? So that is internal listening. Then the second one that we look at is focused listening. Now here, you are fully focused to the speaker and you're paying attention to what they are saying, right? You listen attentively and understand the message that gets conveyed accurately. And you're not distracted by that internal dialogue that's taking place in your mind, right? Now, so that's your focus listening, where you are listening to the person and there's an engagement. Finally, you've got the global listening, that environmental listening. Now, this is the highest level of it, right? Where it is your entire environment or your surrounding also that plays a role. This is where you're paying attention to not only what is being said, but also what they mean by it, or gauging by the information available, the tonality of the person, the facial expressions, the body language, the emotions. Sometimes you would have heard somebody talk about their vacation so, with so much energy to it, and you also resonate to it, and suddenly you are also in that conversation. You feel like you were with them. It is that level of listening. So as facilitators, this is important. Now we've looked at a little bit of what is facilitation and the mindset aspect, right? Now in our agenda, we also spoke that we are going to look at some of the tools that you use, and here are some that we would like to share. Now, you are most welcome in the chat box to also drop any other tools that you share, so that maybe it's something that maybe we would like to also investigate and see if that's something that works for us. Why not, right? So as you're facilitating, right, there are different ways to collaborate with your participants. Now, when you need to share information with somebody, how do you do it? You can have filing and storage options, right? Where we use Google Drives, we use SharePoint, Dropbox, OneDrive. There are so many tools out there to be able to share material, because prior to a meeting or a facilitation session, there's some material or a pre-read that you might want to share, right? Or post as an action. Then you've got whiteboards and post-its. Now, there are apps for this like Miro, Mural, Jamboards, Trello. In case you're not very familiar or don't want to use Mural, Trello is beautiful to use also. And it allows you to bring in your participants to share their thoughts and throw in those post-its, throw in those comments, and have collaborative conversations around that. And you get to visualize also at the same time of what you're working on. And you've got your video conferencing, right? Where, like we're already on Zoom, you've got Teams, you've got Google, you've got Hangouts. And this is particularly with online that we're talking. And post-class, or sometimes even, post a meeting or even pre-meeting, you might want to do a survey to collect some data or information about the kind of audience that you're going to be engaging with, right? So you can use Google Forms, SurveyMonkey. There's another one also, Get 4 Eyes, that we use as a tool to collect surveys. And how do you keep your audience engagement levels up? How do you check their energy levels? You've got Mentimeter, you've got Storms. There are modes where you can do quizzes also, like using Kahoot, for instance. That is one app that I definitely enjoy using, is Kahoot, right? And there's one more tool that we want to share. That is something that we have personally been using in our, I've been using, I can speak for myself here. I've definitely used this for meetings and even for any trainings that I've done, where it's powers, right? Where you're looking at the purpose. So you create a document for yourself, like a Word document or your notes also. And it doesn't take very long to do it. Initially, you might spend a bit of time into it. However, as you get familiar, it would be faster. And you can use this even as an agenda and drop it in your meeting invites that you send out to your participants, where you're writing in of what is the purpose of the meeting, right? What's a real reason that you're here for that session, or why are you there? It's as a facilitator that you're looking at it, and also for the participants of why are they there that you look at it. You've got the outcomes and the deliverables. You share the outcomes, right? Or what is it that you're expecting from the session? It could be any template that you already have that you can create and share. What do you want to achieve from that session as a facilitator? Or what is it that the participants should get from that session? Is the outcome of it, right? And thirdly, you look at what is in it for me, and you can also look at what is in it for them. It's what attendees want to know, right? And you've got engaged participants. How are you going to engage with the participants? How are you as a facilitator going to engage? And how are the participants going to engage, right? What the tools you'd be using is one way to look at it. And you've got roles and responsibilities. So as a facilitator, you've got a role of how you're going to facilitate the session, or what are the actions you're going to be taking. And you might have a co-facilitator also who you can add in and say XYZ would be their role or responsibility. And as participants, what is their responsibility in that session that they're going to be part of? And finally, self-care, right? That is very, very important. And that's something we live by. It's about what can you do to ensure that you are in the best of energy levels during that class, or that session. What can you do? Where, if you've ever been let's say you've not slept very well the previous night and you're going to go into a facilitation session the next day, are you going to be that energy? Are you going to have that entire energy in there? Or during your sessions also, how do you keep it amped up? How do you keep those energy levels up, where you're allowing participants, or you can let them know that, oh, there's going to be tea, coffee, or there's going to be breaks, continuous breaks, and so on. It's a bit of a biofeedback that you'll consider. So this will be shared with you with the slides, and you can definitely put out some time and explore it, right? And then I'm going to pass it over to Andy to talk a little bit about the stances as a facilitator. What are the different stances that you play? All right, over to you, Andy, for that.
Thank you very much, Arti. So this is the one of the stances, or some of the stances we can take as facilitators. So this comes from the Sailing the Seven Seas by Richard Winfield, and it comes highly recommended from us. So we look at these 3 C's, starting with connections. How do we, as facilitators, connect with the people that we are trying to engage within this meeting? What connections can we make? And this leads us on to what my most important one of all of these is: caring. Caring about the process, caring about what we're trying to achieve, caring about our purpose and outcomes, and caring about what is happening within this meeting. Not just arranging a meeting and sitting at the back and writing notes, but engaging and caring. And this brings us on to having a curiosity as well, being curious. So as facilitators, we may be facilitating meetings that we're not necessarily the expert, but if we have a curiosity, we can provoke good questions to help clarify. And this leads us back to the clarity aspect of it. By being curious, we can help to establish clarity within the meeting, And we have tools like Artie demonstrated with the power statement of how we can establish clarity of the meeting beforehand. So establishing clarity before, during, and also after the meeting as well. Sometimes, as facilitators, we may be required to challenge some people. And this doesn't mean putting them on the spot and saying, what do you mean by this? What are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying. This comes into the curiosity part and saying, could you explain this more? Could you help me to understand this? Are there any other aspects? And challenging people in a psychologically safe way, which brings us on to a confidence. So confidence also has two meanings. Having confidence in ourselves as facilitators. And this could mean practice, having the right tools, having the right preparation, but also confidence is part of confidentiality. So creating a psychologically safe space where people can feel free to challenge each other as well and not be shouted down and not be told, shut up, don't do this, where we can all have a productive discussion. And finally, the commitment. So being able to, as facilitators, being able to commit to what our purpose is, but also encouraging commitment post the meeting, after the meeting. What has this meeting done? What value are we delivering to this meeting? And what can we commit to that can make this meeting valuable, that can deliver value from this meeting to our organizations? So we have some engagement tools that I'd like to talk about. And I'd like to talk about these specifically within the virtual space. According to the latest State of Agile report, only 3% of businesses have responded that they will be going back to the office full time. Many Agile businesses are now looking at hybrid models or complete working from home. So how do we, as facilitators, how do we manage that hybrid model? We start off with the round robin technique, which many of you may have heard of. This is you can either use a pass the stick. So someone volunteers or someone's nominated to go first in the discussion, and then they nominate someone to go second, and we go around the circle or around the Zoom conversation so that we can talk. We can also do this in alphabetical order. And this really helps in virtual facilitation, because when if we're face to face in an office environment together, it's a little easier for us to sort of interrupt, or for us to raise a hand, or to sort of judge and listen to each other's sort of body language. When we're facilitating online or virtual conversations, we need to be cognizant of this. And round robin is a good example of giving everybody a chance to speak. Having a gallery walk, and this is if you have something like a storyboard, or if you have a plan that you'd like to walk through step by step. Now this you can do online as well. We're doing it right now. We're sharing a presentation online via Zoom. So using this, we can use visual aids, and this also leads into pictographic representation as well, where we can look at how we can visualize things. And using visualization is something that has become very easy with modern tools such as Zoom, Google Meets, and some of the others that Artie mentioned, Miro, virtual whiteboards that brings us on to sticky storming. So when we're in an office environment, we could hand everyone a pad of sticky notes, and we can put these sticky notes up on the wall, on the window, on a whiteboard. You can do that online as well with these online whiteboarding tools like Jamboards in Google, or with Miro or Mural. The Pomodoro technique as well. How many people have heard of the Pomodoro technique? Let me know in the chat. Type yes or no if you've heard of Pomodoro.
We've got one yes, one no.
Yes, yes.
Few no.
So mixture of yeses and nos. So the Pomodoro technique talks about having regular breaks. So in order to optimize the attention span of our attendees or the meetings that we're facilitating. So this could be having a 10-minute break every hour or having a 5-minute break every 30 minutes. And this is really crucial when we're working online, because in an office environment, we can use other activities such as musical chairs. If we sense that the energy levels are dropping, we can say, okay, everybody stand up and all switch chairs to just raise the energy level or get people a bit more energized or excited. When we're working from home, a lot of us may be working from our dining room, our kitchen table, or our bedroom. So giving people a break, a 5-minute break every 25 minutes, means that we can say, during this break, stand up, get a snack, get a coffee, give yourself a big stretch, so that we're helping to keep the energy levels up in the meetings that we're facilitating. Using innovation games. One of my favorite is we used to play business poker. So we'd have in a meeting room, we'd have a load of sticky notes down of business objectives or tasks that we wanted to do. And we would invite our stakeholders in, we'd give them a pile of poker chips and ask them to bet on which ones they think are going to be most profitable. Now you can do this again with online tools such as Mural, Miro, online whiteboard tools. You can be creative, come up with your own ideas and like copy and paste images of poker chips and give those to different people. We can do these kind of innovation games online. If anyone uses planning poker, if you're using Scrum or Kanban, if you're writing user stories and using planning poker to estimate, there are lots of really good online planning poker tools as well that we can use. A secret box. So in a physical world, a secret box is literally a box with a slot in it, like a post box, that people can anonymously put their suggestions in. And we can do that online as well by using something like Google Forms or SurveyMonkey, where we have an anonymous feedback form that we can use during, before, or after the meeting. And we can encourage psychological safety within this by asking people, please drop your comments into this form, this online form, and your comments and your observations will be anonymous. Having a social contract as well. Many of you may be familiar with a social contract, but how about an online virtual social contract, where we talk about managing your microphones, keeping your microphones off when you're not speaking to eliminate background noise. And how do we use webcams? Some of us may be in our living rooms or in our dining rooms, or have our families walking around, or our cats jumping all over us. So what's our social contract about keeping our webcams on? These things are important to consider when we're virtual. And a parking lot is a great tool as well. So when we're in a meeting room and sometimes people could be talking over each other or like pointing, that is magnified so much more when you're on Zoom or on Google Meet, that you just can't hear anything. It becomes crazy. So creating a parking lot is a way of creating a to-do list for someone who might have an idea that they'd like to come back to later. It's a bit similar to our Q&A section that we have in this. So we ask you to pop in your questions into the Q&A section, and we'll come back to them after we've established and we've finished the flow of the thing that we're trying to facilitate. We also have some tools for alignment as well. So Fist of 5 is an example which you can use if you're on a webcam, and we can use this, for example, for establishing the energy levels in the room. So you could say on a scale of 0 to 5, where 0 means I just want to go back to bed, And 5 means I'm really excited and I want to crack on. What are your energy levels? So you can ask everyone to hold up a fist and count down from 3, 2, 1 and hold up their fingers. And if anyone is sitting on a 2, we can then come together as a group, and as facilitators, we can facilitate this conversation to say, how can we raise the energy levels here? How can we help? How can we structure this better? Or we could follow up after the meeting with that person and say, how could we improve our meetings? How could I improve my facilitation techniques according to you? We have Roman voting as well, which is a simple thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no. And you can use emojis for this as well. This is the benefit that you can use emojis for either of these, actually. If you look on Zoom, WebEx, lots of these have different emojis. Some of them have like you can use a tortoise for slow down, or a hair emoji for speed up. You can use thumbs up and thumbs down. Lots of them have the opportunity to raise a hand so that you know that I would like to ask a question about this. So taking advantage of modern technology is how we can advance our tools and techniques, how we can advance our skills as virtual facilitators. So how about large group facilitation? Here's an example of something called the World Cafe, where we create an environment, maybe in a big meeting room, where we have a series of tables with no more than 4 or 5 people. And what we do is we will set a timer for 20 minutes, ask a question to each of these different tables, maybe different questions, maybe the same question to all tables. And then after 20 minutes, we rotate those tables and get different perspectives from different combinations of different people. And after each round, we put those results on a big board, and we harvest those ideas using the wisdom of the crowd. So using all of the tools we spoke about earlier, we can do this World Cafe using breakout rooms. We can have a whiteboard, a virtual whiteboard like a Jamboard. We can use Zoom to facilitate this. And this can be up to, a World Cafe could be maybe up to 80, 100 people. If we're trying to harness the wisdom of the crowd, a large crowd, and harvest lots and lots of ideas. Now, when we're talking about large groups, how do we facilitate a group of up to 100 people? This is where co-facilitation comes in. So we're doing this right now. Myself and Artie are here co-facilitating this webinar. And what it does is it helps us to capitalize on our strengths, our different passions, our different experiences. It helps us also to conserve energy. So when at Leadership Tribe, when we're teaching classes that last 4 or 5 hours, we can split that time between each other so that one of us gets to sit down for an hour and we can serve our energy together. Maximizing diverse resources as well. Understanding that we need different perspectives. So if you are facilitating a large group or a large audience, think about who could help with bringing different perspectives and who could help with bringing a different type of style if you need different styles within that facilitation, within that meeting. It's also an extra eyes, ears and hands. So when one person's talking or one person's delivering, another person can be observing. So you're able to use those spread those senses across multiple people, maybe 2. Providing mutual support as well, just being there for each other, being able to catch up after the meeting and say, how did that go? How do you think we could improve? And especially in the virtual environment, a backup when technology fails. So if our internet goes out, that's not something that I can control. But if I have a co-facilitator that could jump in if my internet gets disconnected, this smooths the facilitation process when we are facilitating online. So, how do we develop our competencies as facilitators? It starts with self-awareness. It starts with looking in and introspecting upon what our personal strengths and what our personal weaknesses are as facilitators. And we have an example view here, which is the Facilitator Competencies wheel. So this circle here has 6 segments, which all have different facilitator competencies, and you can customize this to your own idea of what your strengths and weaknesses are. And we start from a scale of 0 in the middle, which means I know nothing about it, up to a scale of 10 at the edge of the wheel, which means I'm a complete master of this. So this tool allows us to introspect on where our strengths are. So, for example, here we've given it in this slide, planning appropriate group responses, or planning appropriate group processes, or creating and sustaining a participatory environment, where a psychologically safe environment where small voices are heard as loud as the loudest voices. Where do we rate ourselves personally on that scale? And it gives us this idea of a wheel. Now, the goal is not to try and get us to 100% in all of these skills, but to imagine that wheel as what would provide a more smooth ride. So if we have, in this example, guiding groups to appropriate and useful outcomes, if this is where we feel we're weakest, what would it take to take us from a 3 to a 4 or a 5? What would it take to gradually build out those skills so that we can have a more rounded and a more smooth ride as we are facilitating? So this is not necessarily a planning tool or a career progression tool. This tool is used for taking a snapshot of where you are now and allowing you to inspect where you are now and where you could adapt in the future, and continue to fill in this maybe next month, the month after, and track where your progress is going. So we talked about ourselves as facilitators. What do we do? What tools can we use? How can we be effective facilitators? But we also need to remember the other people within the process. So when we're facilitating small groups or large groups, we might be facilitating a conversation between just 2 people. But whatever kind of facilitation we're doing, we need to consider the people in the process. And those people come with their own hopes and fears. Those people have their own objectives, different assumptions, different opinions and biases that they might bring. And biases aren't necessarily a bad thing. If we, as good facilitators, if we can ask questions and ask where do those biases come from, understand those biases and understand those opinions and assumptions, it allows us to bring those kind of invisible, intangible parts of hopes and fears of people, bringing them to the top so that we can talk about it. And then there are different personalities and interactive styles. So there are different models we could use, like some of you may have heard of the DISC model or the INTFJ model, helping us to understand where different people are coming from. What are their objectives? Why are they here? What are their needs? What are their intentions? And helping to understand the people means that we need to be aware of different styles, different techniques, different tools, and different personalities that we may work with during our facilitation, especially when we're facilitating online or virtually, because it's much more difficult to read body language when you're a person on a screen. So having a heightened awareness of the people in the process is critical, according to me. So I'd like to leave you with this. This is a quote from a book by Hunter, Bailey and Taylor in their Building Public Understanding. When they talk about the importance of effective facilitation, they say a facilitator is a peaceful warrior. They say facilitators are warriors of peace because they bring warring sides together to build bridges. And true warriors don't depend on any kind of weapon. The real tools that they use are courage, compassion, and peace. What do you think? What are your thoughts on a facilitator as a peaceful warrior? Type in the chat and let us know. And
Great
warrior. It is a great movie. Yes, it does come from the film Peaceful Warrior and the book Courage, Compassion, and Peace. So Russell.
Let's have a look at the Q&A. Andy, would you like to take over that? So one of the questions that was asked was, how do we assess where we are with facilitation and how to grow and become best in facilitation? I would like to chip in with that. And I think Andy shared a really nice facilitator competency is what you could probably start with to see where you lie. And then it'll help you point out what are the skills that you need more time to spend on and work on that. Andy, anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I think the facilitation wheel is something that we use a lot, and you can customize that wheel to be what you consider personally, because it's a self-assessment tool. So what you consider personally to be your strengths and weaknesses, so that you can visualize. This is one of the agile, Scrum and Kanban, one of the agile ways of visualizing it. There's also a tool called ADKA, which is a coaching tool that stands for awareness, desire, knowledge. I always forget the second A, Artie. Do you remember?
The second A is, so you've got awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement.
Ability and reinforcement. So this is a coaching model that you could use also as a self-assessment tool. We teach ADKAR in several of our courses. It's one of the models that we really believe in. If you're interested in that, I'd highly recommend go away, research that, and come back to us if you've got any questions. Let us know what you think.
Then another question that we had was, how do we assess where, oh, sorry, we've done that one. Sorry. Do drafting minutes of meetings help in becoming active listeners?
That's a very interesting one. There's I think it's a Chinese proverb that says, you were given two ears and one mouth, so that you could listen twice as much as you talk. So when we're talking about active listening, what I find personally, when I'm writing down notes, my ears aren't engaged because my hands are engaged in doing that. So sometimes I'll be writing notes and then looking up, and I've missed some of it. So I've not even passively listening. I've been not listening at all. So this is where, in my opinion, this is where co-facilitation can come in. If we're going to be facilitating, especially a large meeting or is something very technical, what we might want to do is ask someone else to co-facilitate as a scribe, so that they can take the minutes of the meeting while we are focused on engaging and keeping people engaged and making sure that we are going through that power statement, establishing purpose, establishing the outcome, and making that meeting productive and efficient. Have you got any other thoughts on that, Artie?
I think that's a good one, Andy.
Thank you. I think it's a good one as well.
And we've got one more question, which was, could you please let us know the difference between a social contract and a social agreement? If there is not any, then the term contract versus agreement. Your views on it, Andy?
Oh, so a lot of organizations that we've worked with have, like, they use these terms interchangeably. So like a social contract, working agreement, social agreement, they may all mean the same kind of thing. In terms of the difference between contract and agreement, sometimes this might be that, like, we establish an actual contract that we all write our names to and sign that we are going to agree to that. And sometimes that contract may have some maybe some like repercussions. What if you don't fulfill this contract? So in some of our classes, sometimes we have a, if you're laid back from your 10-minute break, you have to do the chicken dance. So that might be part of your social contract. Or it might just be an agreement, a verbal agreement, or something that we agree amongst ourselves. Either of those methods, it depends. I think there's not a right or a wrong answer, but there is a correct answer. The correct answer is whatever works for your team or your function, whatever you're trying to facilitate. And for either of those, always, as we're agilicists and as we're being agile, always wanting to update that social contract and that social agreement, keeping it up to date, reviewing it, inspecting and adapting it, just like we would in a Scrum retrospective. Always make sure, whether it's a contract that we sign or whether it's an agreement that's verbal, that we keep making sure that it's up to date and always relevant.
And I think that is it. Those are our questions.
Okay.
Any others before we call it a day?
Just to drop in for anyone who's interested in keeping in touch, keeping connected. If you like, we run these free webinars in addition to our paid courses. As Artie said, we also we work with consultants. Keep in touch with us on LinkedIn. Follow us on Facebook. You can find myself and my friend Artie on LinkedIn as well. We'd love to stay in touch.
All right. Thank you, Russell.
Okay. That's all from me, Artie. Any more from you?
All good. All right. And have a good weekend, everyone.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you for spending time with us, and have a wonderful weekend. And we hope to see you again in the future.